Okay, get this. What if a $50 million mistake could actually bring sworn enemies together? It sounds crazy, right? Well, we're about to dive into a story that starts with a totally gut-wrenching loss and ends with, well, a surprising truce. And in the process, it reveals this fundamental clash right at the heart of the crypto world.
$50 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. Now imagine it vanishing. Poof, gone in an instant. And look, this wasn't some big market crash or a super sophisticated hack. No, this was one of the largest on-chain scams to ever hit a single person. And the craziest part? It all boiled down to a simple and honestly, a very human mistake.
So again, we're not talking about a flaw in some complex smart contract or a protocol getting exploited. Nope, this was something deeper. It was a fundamental design choice in the blockchain itself that just collided head-on with human nature. And it cost someone an absolute fortune, all because of a single fateful copy and paste.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth does something like this even happen, right? Well, let's break it down. We're going to look at this clever but also devastatingly simple scam that made it all possible. It's got a name: address poisoning. And you know what? It preys on a habit that almost every single one of us who uses crypto has.
Okay, so here's how it works, and it is insidious. An attacker sends you a tiny, almost unnoticeable dust transaction. But here's the trick. It comes from a wallet address that looks almost identical to one of your real contacts. So that fake address just sits there in your transaction history, poisoning it. Then, next time you go to send a big chunk of funds, what do? You do what we all do. You glance at your history, you copy what you think is the right address, and boom, in one click, all that money is sent straight to the scammer. And it is gone. Forever.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just a case of really bad luck. This specific type of scam is only possible because of a fundamental design choice in how certain blockchains are built. So it really begs the question, right? Why are big networks like Ethereum vulnerable to this, while others, like Bitcoin and Cardano, well, apparently they're not?
And it all comes down to two totally different design philosophies. See, Ethereum uses what's called an account model. The easiest way to think about it is like your bank account. You've got one address, and it has a public, running history of every single transaction. And that is the history that scammers can poison. But then you've got Bitcoin and Cardano. They use something different, the UTXO model. Now, instead of a bank statement, think of this more like physical cash in your pocket. Each transaction is a unique, one-time event. There's no persistent account history for a scammer to sneak into an exploit in the same way. It's a completely different approach.
And you know who is quick to point this out? Cardano's founder, Charles Hoskinson. As soon as this news broke, he did not hold back. He came right out and said, look, this kind of attack is just impossible on UTXO systems. So from his point of view, this wasn't just a simple user error. No, it was a totally predictable outcome of what he sees as a flawed design. A flaw that his chosen architecture, UTXO, is specifically built to prevent.
So this whole thing, this one incident, it perfectly frames one of the biggest debates in all of crypto. It's this constant tug-of-war between security on one side and flexibility on the other. And as this $50 million mistake proves, these aren't just abstract technical arguments. Every single one of these design choices has massive real-world consequences.
All right, so let's lay it out. On one side, you've got the UTXO model. Bitcoin and Cardano. It puts security first by isolating every transaction. The result? It's way more resistant to scams like this address poisoning. But there's always a trade-off, right? The argument against it is that it can be less flexible when you're trying to build really complex, interconnected smart contracts. Then, on the other side, you have Ethereum's account model. It's all about that flexibility. And honestly, that's what has fueled its huge DeFi and NFT ecosystems. But the price you pay for that, as we've just seen in spectacular fashion, is this persistent state that can create these exact kinds of vulnerability.
Now, normally, a debate like this would just pour gasoline on the fire, right? You'd expect the usual crypto tribalism, just endless arguments on social media. But this time, something totally unexpected happened, something that nobody saw coming. A really fierce rivalry started to look, well, a whole lot like a partnership.
So as all these arguments were raging online, who steps into the middle of it all? Anatoly Yakovenko, the co-founder of Solana, another huge competitor to Cardano. And everyone's probably expecting him to fan the flames, but he did the exact opposite. He basically called for a ceasefire. He tweeted that all this fighting between projects is incredibly bearish for the entire industry. He was essentially saying, hey guys, a rising tide lifts all boats, so let's stop poking holes in each other's. And the response? It was just as surprising.
Charles Hoskinson actually replied positively. And just like that, in the span of a few tweets, which started as a technical debate over a $50 million scam, it evolved into a public agreement to actually explore connecting their two networks. Think about that. Two of the biggest competitors in the entire space were suddenly, publicly, talking about building a bridge between their ecosystems.
So, what does all this mean? Where does this leave us? Well, this whole journey, from a devastating scam to a completely unlikely alliance, it really points to a potentially massive shift in the crypto industry. A shift away from everyone just building their own isolated kingdoms, their own walled gardens, and maybe, just maybe, towards creating a much more interconnected future.
So the key takeaways here are pretty clear. First off, blockchain design is not just some academic theory. It has huge, multi-million-dollar consequences for actual users. That's lesson number one. Second, the whole narrative of the industry might finally be shifting away from pure competition and more towards interoperability. And look, this isn't just a one-off thing. We're seeing these cross-chain efforts pop up everywhere now. You've got Solana adding bridging support for other assets. Cardano's got its own multi-chain plans. It really seems like the future might not be about one chain to rule them all, but about many different chains all working together.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. A $50 million mistake brought a deep technical divide to light, but it also, somehow, sparked this unlikely truce. It really makes you wonder, are the old maximalist days of, my chain is the only one that matters, finally coming to an end? Could a future built on collaboration and interoperability be closer than we think? I'd love to know what you think. Will it be collaboration or competition that defines the next era of crypto?